My husband left me by text and took all our money. He had no clue what was about to happen. My name is Harper Lane. I'm in my mid-30s, and until that morning, I thought I was living the kind of life people envied. I worked part-time, balancing my own job with the constant support my husband, Colton, said he needed for his career. I built my schedule around his, made sure dinner was on the table after his late meetings, and told myself that patience and sacrifice were proof of love. Then my phone buzzed. It was a short message, only a few words, but it felt like the ground had fallen away beneath me. Colton had written, "I'm done. Don't call me. I've moved our money." At first, I thought I'd misread it. I stared at the screen, waiting for another message, maybe an explanation or a cruel joke. Nothing came. I called him, but my call went straight to voicemail. That was when my chest tightened, and I felt the panic rise. He wasn't coming back. He had really done it. I checked our accounts, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type in the passwords. 0. Every single one of them was empty. Savings, checking, even the emergency fund I thought was untouchable. He hadn't just walked out on me. He had stripped away every piece of security I had worked for. I sat on the couch, unable to move, my phone still in my hand. The silence of the house pressed down on me. I tried to tell myself to breathe, to think, but all I could feel was this crushing wave of betrayal. How do you explain the moment you realize that the person you trusted most has chosen to hurt you in the deepest way possible? I remembered the nights I stayed awake while he worked on his business plans, the times I gave up overtime hours because he wanted me home, the dreams I had quietly shelved to make space for his. All of it felt like ashes now, swept away by a text message that ended not just a marriage, but the version of myself that believed love was enough. Tears blurred my vision, but beneath the heartbreak, something else stirred. Anger. Shock had frozen me in place, but the anger was sharp, burning. He thought I would collapse. He thought I would give up. As I sat there, my phone heavy in my palm, I realized Colton had no idea who I truly was. He believed he had taken everything, but he didn't know what he had set in motion. I wasn't sure how yet, and I didn't know when, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was not going to stay broken. The text that was meant to end me was the spark that would change everything. This was only the beginning. When I look back now, it feels almost unreal how carefully the lie was built. On the outside, our marriage looked perfect. Friends often said we were the couple who had it all figured out. Colton had ambition, I had patience, and together we looked like a team. I thought I had found a partner who would walk with me through every storm. I believed in us so strongly that I never questioned how much of myself I was giving up. I once had dreams of my own. I wanted to travel, maybe start a small design business, and live a life where I felt independent and creative. But Colton said his career needed focus, and his startup would one day secure our future. I told myself my time could wait. So I worked nights at a local diner, my feet aching, while also running errands, paying bills, and keeping the house in order. I convinced myself it was love to carry the weight, so he could chase his dreams. When the money started coming in from his projects, he insisted we put everything into one joint account. He said it was safer, smarter, a sign of unity. He called it our nest egg, and I felt guilty for even hesitating. He was so persuasive, painting pictures of the house we would buy, the vacations we would take, the children we would raise without worry. I signed the papers, handed over my savings, and believed I was investing in a shared life. But behind that charm were cracks I chose to ignore. There were nights he came home late with no real explanation, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his. He'd brush it off with a laugh, calling me silly for even asking. If I pressed harder, he'd twist my concern into weakness, saying I didn't trust him enough. His words always left me feeling like the problem was mine, not his. He had a way of making me doubt myself. If he forgot something, suddenly it was my fault for not reminding him. If he was distant, he claimed I was imagining things. And yet, when he wanted, he could be so affectionate, so convincing in his declarations of love, that I'd silence the small voice inside me whispering that something wasn't right. I remember one evening in particular. I had spent hours making his favorite meal after another long shift. He walked in, barely looked at me, and said he had to run out again, without touching his plate. I stood there staring at the untouched food, feeling the sting in my chest. But when he returned hours later with flowers, smiling like nothing had happened, I accepted his excuse. I told myself love meant forgiveness. The truth was, I saw the signs. I felt the unease. But I buried it because I believed loyalty meant standing by him no matter what. I thought choosing suspicion over faith would make me a bad wife. So I held on, telling myself the sacrifices were worth it, never realizing I was feeding into the perfect lie he had built around me. I found things Colton thought he had hidden. Papers tucked inside folders, copies of contracts with notes, and a flash drive he forgot. At first they seemed ordinary, but a pattern appeared. Dates and numbers did not match. Names showed up in transfers I did not know. The more I read, the clearer it became. I moved slowly. I made copies and sorted the papers into piles. One pile had bank statements, another had receipts and a stack of printed emails. I dated each sheet and wrote short notes so I would not lose track. Doing this calmed me. My hand steadied. Among the documents were transfers to an account that did not belong to our company. I followed the trail and found the name Delaney Cross on several lines. The transfers matched times he said he was at meetings. Amounts were small at first, then larger. It looked like he moved money little by little so no one would notice. Seeing those entries made everything fall into place. I did not work alone. Sierra sat with me for hours, sorting the stacks. She asked questions I had not thought of and pointed out dates I might have missed. She comforted me when I felt raw and pushed me when I felt unsure. When I told her Delaney's name appeared in the records, she said, "We need help. This is more than you can do alone." We found Elias Grant, a lawyer who did not like the usual rules. He did not wear a stiff suit, and he listened carefully. Elias read the papers and asked precise questions. He wanted copies of everything and told us to keep quiet. "Loose talk lets people cover their tracks," he said. "We move when the ground is solid." Elias showed how to use what we had. He said we could ask banks to freeze suspicious accounts and file complaints that make banks reveal who received money. Small transfers can be traced when you show a pattern, he said. Delaney's account could become a key link. He warned it would be messy and might take time, but he said we had strong beginnings. We drew a plan on paper like a battle map. First, copies and backups of all evidence. Second, legal notices to banks and Colton's company. Third, careful contact with partners who might not know. Elias wanted each move to trap Colton, not let him hide more. Sierra and I agreed to be patient and firm. We also took practical steps. I changed passwords, secured important files, and moved copies to a hidden folder. Sierra called a contact at the bank to ask general questions without naming anyone. Elias prepared documents to show the judge if we needed a freeze. Small actions tightened the plan and made me feel less like a victim and like someone with a clear purpose. When the phone rang and I saw his name, my stomach flipped. For days I had wondered if he would ever call. Part of me wanted to hang up, but another part knew this was my chance. I took a deep breath and answered. My voice shook on purpose. I let him think I was broken, desperate for answers. I asked why he had done this, why he had left me with nothing. Colton's tone was cold at first, but soon his arrogance bled through. He enjoyed hearing the pain in my voice. He told me I should have seen it coming, that I was too soft, too trusting. I let him keep talking, quietly pressing the record button on my phone. My heart raced, but I forced myself to keep sounding weak. The more pitiful I acted, the bolder he became. He started to brag. He said I would never survive without him. He laughed as he described moving the money and how easy it was to fool me. "You never had a clue, Harper," he said. "You always believed whatever I told you." His words stung, but I stayed quiet, letting him dig his own grave. He even mentioned Delaney, bragging that she understood him in ways I never could. The smirk in his voice made my skin crawl. Every cruel sentence went into the recording. Every boast, every slip of arrogance was now evidence. By the time he hung up, I was shaking, not from sadness, but from fury. He thought he had won. He thought I was still the woman who would curl up and cry while he built a new life. What he didn't see was that his pride had just handed me the weapon I needed. I sent the recording to Elias that night. He listened carefully, then looked at me with steady eyes. "This is gold," he said. He just admitted to everything. His arrogance will undo him. Hearing that gave me a strength I hadn't felt in weeks. From that moment, our steps grew sharper. Elias drew up papers to prepare for court. He explained how the recording, along with the financial documents, painted a clear picture of theft and fraud. At the same time, I worked on personal details, closing any accounts still in my name with Colton, securing my credit, and keeping a log of every strange call or letter that came my way. We weren't rushing. Elias kept reminding me that timing mattered. "He thinks you're broken. Let him keep thinking that. The longer he believes you're powerless, the easier it will be to corner him. Sierra helped me practice calm responses in case Colton called again. I learned how to sound weak while staying in control. Late at night, when I lay in bed replaying his cruel laughter, I reminded myself of one truth: arrogance blinds people. He believed he was untouchable, but he had no idea how close his downfall was. What he thought was my weakness had become my strength, and soon, he would see just how wrong he was. I learned where Colton and Delaney were living by piecing together little clues. A delivery receipt he carelessly left behind, a credit card charge that linked to an address, and a note in one of his emails. It led me to a rental house on the edge of town. I drove there one afternoon, staying far enough away not to be noticed. The house was flashy, bigger than they needed, with a shiny sports car in the driveway. Both of them walked outside at one point, laughing and carrying shopping bags. I watched Delaney show off new jewelry while Colton tossed car keys in his hand like a trophy. The sight made my chest tighten, but not from heartbreak anymore. It was fury. Every bag, every piece of jewelry, every gleaming item had been bought with money he stole from me. I kept my distance, but I watched enough to see the way he paraded around, showing off his new life. He looked proud, smug, as if he had already erased the past and replaced it with something shinier. He had no idea that I was right there in the shadows, studying him, gathering proof. By then, Elias and I had already built a strong case, but we needed more pressure. That's when I decided to tip off his partners. They thought he was busy, maybe traveling, but I knew the truth. Using an anonymous email account, I sent them copies of the documents showing transfers from the company's funds, along with dates and amounts. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke louder than I ever could. It didn't take long before cracks started to show. Word spread that his partners were questioning missing money. Meetings turned tense, and I heard from one contact that Colton had been avoiding calls. The man who once strutted with confidence was starting to stumble. I watched from a distance as the pressure built. He still thought I was powerless, sitting at home in tears. He had no idea that I was the one feeding the fire under his feet. Every whisper of suspicion at his company, every doubt in his partners' minds, came from the evidence I had placed right in front of them. The thought made me stronger. I no longer felt like the woman abandoned by a cruel text. I was in control, shaping the outcome without him even realizing it. One evening, as I drove past their rental house again, I saw him pacing outside on the phone. His voice carried across the yard, sharp and angry. Delaney came out a moment later, arms folded, clearly annoyed. They looked nothing like the happy couple they wanted the world to believe. I smiled to myself, a small, quiet smile. The cracks were there, and they were only going to grow wider. He didn't know it yet, but his world was beginning to unravel, and I was the one pulling the threads. Elias worked quickly once we had enough proof. He filed charges in court and pushed for Colton's assets to be frozen. The paperwork was heavy, but every document carried weight. I signed my name on forms with steady hands, each signature another step toward justice. When the order went through, Colton's access to money stopped cold. For the first time since his text, I felt like the ground under me was solid again. It didn't take long for the storm to hit his company. His partners, already uneasy from the anonymous tips, now had legal papers in their hands. They saw the numbers, the missing funds, and the transfers into accounts that had nothing to do with the business. The office that once held polished meetings turned into a battleground. Some tried to call him, others demanded answers, but Colton stayed slippery, pretending there was an explanation. The truth was too clear to ignore. The trust was gone, and with it, the company began to collapse. I heard through contacts that his partners had cut ties, distancing themselves before the entire business was dragged down. Clients withdrew, contracts dissolved, and the image of success he had built cracked apart. The man who had once strutted with power was losing the foundation beneath him. Meanwhile, his life with Delaney began to shift. She had followed him because of his promises, the expensive gifts, and the easy charm. But with his accounts frozen, the shine faded fast. The jewelry, the car, the fancy house, all of it was tied to money he could no longer touch. She saw the truth. He wasn't the wealthy man he pretended to be. Whispers reached me that she was pulling away, no longer laughing at his side. She had joined him for the riches, not the struggle. The day I faced him in court, my chest felt heavy, but not from fear. I had prepared for this moment. Colton walked in wearing a suit, his hair slicked back, his smirk carved into his face like nothing had changed. He looked at me the way he always had, as if I were beneath him, as if I had no chance. His confidence was almost laughable. We sat across from each other while the judge called the case. My lawyer presented the evidence: the bank transfers, the hidden files, the receipts that traced every stolen dollar. Colton barely reacted, leaning back like it was all a misunderstanding that would soon be brushed aside. When asked to respond, he spoke smoothly, claiming I was bitter and inventing lies to hurt him. For a moment, I almost felt the sting of his words. He had always been good at turning the story, making me doubt myself. But then I remembered the ace I carried. When the time came, Elias stood tall and pressed play on the recording. The courtroom filled with Colton's voice. His laugh echoed as he bragged about taking everything. He mocked me for trusting him. He admitted to moving the money and told me I would never survive without him. Every cruel word, every arrogant slip, was laid bare for everyone to hear. Colton's smirk faltered. His face tightened, his eyes darted, but it was too late. The mask he had worn for so long shattered in front of the judge, the lawyers, and the room full of witnesses. For the first time, he wasn't in control of the story. I didn't gloat. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, watching as the weight of his own words crushed him. He had thought I was powerless, but now the truth was undeniable. What he meant to break me had become the weapon that would bring him down. The judge's decision came after hours of arguments and evidence. When the words were spoken, they landed like the final strike of a hammer. The court ruled in my favor. My assets would be restored, and Colton was found guilty of fraud and theft. For weeks, I had lived in fear of what would happen, but in that moment, relief swept over me like a tide. Justice had been served, and the man who tried to erase me was finally held accountable. The courtroom was silent as the details were read aloud. Colton sat stiffly, his jaw clenched, his face pale. The arrogance that had carried him for so long was gone. He tried to speak, but the judge cut him off. His power, his smooth words, his tricks, none of them mattered anymore. The law had stripped away the image he had built. News of the case spread quickly. His company was already crumbling, but now the final blow fell. His name was dragged through every headline, each article describing how he betrayed both his wife and his business. Partners who once praised him now avoided him. Clients who once trusted him cut ties overnight. The empire he thought was unshakable lay in ruins. Delaney, too, disappeared from his side. She had been with him for the lifestyle, for the money and the luxury. Without those things, he had nothing to offer her. She left quietly, slipping away once she saw the truth. No jewelry, no house, no endless spending. Just a disgraced man with charges hanging over his head. I heard she didn't even say goodbye. She simply vanished, leaving him as empty as the accounts he once drained. As for me, I walked out of the courtroom with my head high. My money would return to me, but it was more than that. I had my dignity back. I had stood against him, faced his cruelty, and proved he was not untouchable. For months he believed I was weak, but I had shown him strength he never imagined I possessed. He tried to catch my eye as I passed. I stopped just long enough to look at him. No anger, no gloating, no words. Just calm. I wanted him to see the woman he had underestimated, the woman who had risen while he had fallen. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was silence, the kind that cuts deeper than any insult. Revenge did not come with shouting or triumph. It came with stillness. He sat there, stripped of everything, while I walked free with more than I had before. He had thought the text would destroy me. Instead, it destroyed him. Outside the courthouse, the sun felt brighter than it had in months. Reporters called out questions, but I kept walking. This was not about telling the world my side. It was about knowing deep inside that I had survived and won. Colton's story was over, and mine was just beginning. He had nothing left, no money, no respect, no love. I had something far greater. I had peace. And as I stepped into the fresh air, I understood the quiet truth. His downfall was the only answer I needed. I moved into a small but warm house on the edge of town. It was not grand or filled with luxury, but it was mine. Every corner carried my touch, from the plants I placed in the windows to the soft rug I chose for the living room. For the first time in years, I felt safe in a space that belonged only to me. No lies lingered in the walls, no shadows of betrayal. Just peace. The first night I slept there, I kept the lamp on beside me. It wasn't out of fear, but out of quiet joy. I wanted to see the room when I opened my eyes in the morning. The plain walls felt like freedom. The silence felt like healing. Piece by piece, I began to rebuild, not just the home, but myself. Each day I added something small. A framed photo of my parents on the dresser. A set of dishes I picked myself. A desk by the window where I could write and dream again. These things may have looked ordinary to others, but to me, they were symbols. Every plate, every book, every chair reminded me that I had created this life on my own terms. Sierra was by my side through it all. She helped me move boxes, laughed as we tried to build furniture, and stayed late when the loneliness crept in. One evening, after we set up the kitchen, she poured us both a glass of wine. She raised her glass and said, "You didn't just survive, you won." Her voice carried pride, and her eyes shone with warmth. I smiled, feeling her words sink deep. She was right. This wasn't only survival. It was victory. Sitting there with her, I thought about everything that had happened. I didn't feel the sting of loss anymore. I didn't think about what I had given up for Colton or the years I had wasted. Instead, I thought about what I had gained. Strength. Clarity. A new chance at life that belonged only to me. The pain he caused had carved out space for something greater, and now I was filling it with hope. I realized that I was no longer defined by being a wife or by being betrayed. I was simply Harper, a woman who had walked through fire and come out stronger. My reflection in the mirror no longer looked broken. It looked steady, calm, and ready. Some evenings, I sat on the porch and watched the sun dip below the horizon. I thought about that text, the one he had sent to end everything. For a long time, it haunted me. Now, it made me smile, not because of the pain it carried, but because of what followed. That message had been meant to shatter me, but it had become the spark that lit a new path. He thought he broke me by text. I whispered to myself one evening. He had no clue I was just getting started. Those words felt like a promise, not just to myself, but to the life I was building. The past was behind me. The future stretched wide open, waiting to be written. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step into it with courage. Do you think Harper did the right thing by standing up to Colton, or should she have handled it differently? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.